Hey, Soul Warriors, this is Jessica Noel, and I'm coming at you with season 2, episode 1 of my podcast, Uncovering Your Authentic Soulful Self. And today, in season 2, episode 1, we're going to be talking about grief and loss as a catalyst for transformation. So before we begin, I want to just take a moment to take a few deep breaths and really tune in, become present. Close your eyes if you're able to. Take a couple long, slow, deep breaths. And really feel your body, feel your feet on the floor. See if you can drop your energy from your head space, from the thinking mind into the heart space, so that you can listen to these words and receive this energy through not only your mind, but also through your heart. And through the lens of truth. Okay, so today I wanted to first read something to you. I wrote, it's an adaptation of something I wrote and spoke of. And I would like to read it to you, and then we're going to go through it and sort of unpack it. And I'll talk a little bit more of each part of it. So for right now, if you can just take a minute and just really relax and listen to the words, I will read it slowly, and then we can talk about some specifics. I also want to say that this summer has been very transformational for many of you. There's been a lot of shifting, a lot of transformation. Some of it has been very challenging. The equinox and the last full moon, that time frame, which was pretty close together. The last full moon was just on Friday. The equinox was on the 22nd of September, so pretty close together. That was just a time frame of a lot of major transformation. And prior to that, really the whole summer, in particular August into mid-September, was pretty intense for a lot of people in terms of transformation, going through challenges. Some things were very painful. Other people might have moved through it very lightly. It really depends on where you are in your path and what you're working with. If you had some shadows and had some things to work through, then you probably experienced some shadows coming up, and some which would have looked like some pain, suffering, traumas. So hoping that you've moved through that. Many people have noticed a huge release and a lot of healing, and other people are still kind of moving through that and integrating the healing of the experiences that they went through, or maybe even just things that had come up for them emotionally that they were working through with the mind and with the body. So let's begin. Again, this is on grief and loss as a catalyst for transformation. So I just want to talk a little bit about it after I read this to you. So as we think about allowing grief and loss to become a catalyst for transformation, I want to say that as you listen to this, I also want you to understand that the experience of grief and loss can be from many things. This can be the death of a loved one. It can be loss due to separation or the ending of a relationship. It can even be loss of health and really loss of anything in your life situation, your life experience that results in an experience of grief or pain. So you can see that when I'm talking about grief and loss, it can be a wide range of things that you can experience that as a result of not only the death physically of a loved one. So like I said, I'm going to be reading this, so I'll be looking down for most of it, and then we'll start talking through it. When the experience of trauma, grief, or loss enter our life, we have choices. We can wall up and close our heart. We can shove it down. We can numb it through distractions or substances. We can carry it in our bodies where it can manifest as disease, or we can allow it to break us open. A broken heart is an open heart. It takes courage and strength to just allow our broken heart to be broken and sit with it. If we can sit with it, there's an inner alchemy that takes place where suffering turns to love, compassion, and wisdom, the type that can only be attained through the alchemy that deep suffering can bring. It is much like the idea of coal that turns into the diamond. These moments of despair create openings and crack us open in ways that break through our former defenses to allow us to see how insignificant so many things are that we used to put in the way of fully loving each other and forgiving each other. There is a sacred vulnerability that occurs at these times, and this is the choice point to allow it to be a catalyst for change. Pain is transformation. We just have to allow it to be that. Let grief and loss plant a seed for us and help us to consider what we can do to become the best version of ourselves. Consider the outpouring of love in times of what we experience as tragedies. We have all seen, and some of us have experienced, where all the differences are set aside for the sake of unity and love and helping the family, loved ones, and even groups of people we see suffering. How can we carry this forward and take away the wisdom and unconditional love that grief can bring of continuing to love, appreciate, and hold our children and family members and loved ones tighter, to leave nothing unsaid, to appreciate every day we have together, to set our differences aside in the name of love and help one another, even strangers, and not to forget that life is fleeting and that all we have are these moments. These cracks where we feel broken or even shattered now are, as many sages, saints, and enlightened ones say, is when and where the light pours in. This is the opportunity to allow, through saying yes, to let the light of healing, the light of love, the light of the divine to pour into those cracks and heal us and bring us insight, wisdom, and clarity, and to truly do what we came here to this earth to do, and to continue to come together and spread unconditional love to one another every day. So in the beginning of this information that I just read to you, when I talked about sitting with this as we experience some form of grief, again, whether it be the departing of the loved one in our life, or whether it be separation due to divorce or a breakup of a relationship or loss of health, loss of income, of a job, any type of loss that you're experiencing pain and grief on, when I'm talking about sitting with it, another word for that is surrender. It's the same as surrender. You know, so often when pain comes to visit us, when grief, when we experience something as loss. So I really want to stress that point of really when we're experiencing something as loss, it isn't truly a loss at the highest level, but that's how we experience it, especially with our human emotions. So often when we experience that, we want to run from it, right? We want to do whatever we can to distract ourselves from it, whether that be, watching TV, using substances, doing something that excessively, some people do excessive exercising, excessive work of any kind. There's all types of ways to sort of run from this pain. through these different routes. You know, we can try to shove it down. Like I said, pain, if we do not process the grief and pain, it's trying to get our attention. So if you have something coming up in your physical body, and this is going to be a different episode, but if you have something coming up in your physical body, in my work and my experience and how I support others, there are always emotional and energetic causes, and that is the root of it. So it has to be cleared. So that's an example of storing it in your body, storing it in your field. It might sit in your energy field because you're not truly surrendering to it, allowing yourself to feel it and process it through. Maybe you need support to do that. Sometimes this is an automatic process, and it's not almost always an automatic process, that it's not intentional for it to create, dis-ease or for you to distract yourself. It feels scary. It can feel really scary to sit with this fear, to sit with this pain, these feelings of loss. But you can do it. And let me tell you that is the fastest route. So a lot of times, with the distraction and with trying to store it, shove it down, or carrying it in our bodies, these types of things, we feel like, okay, so I just got to keep going. So I just have to keep moving forward. I have to keep doing all these things and keep living life. Well, yes, okay, you do. But it's really important to give yourself time and space to process that as well and to sit with it. So a lot of times, going back to my original point, a lot of times the reason that you're doing that is because you want to hurry up and get it over with. Hurry up and let's figure this out. Let's move past this. Let me tell you that the fastest way to move through that and to move past it and to get out of the pain and grief is to truly surrender to it and sit with it and let it bring up whatever it needs to bring up. And again, with that word soul warrior, that would be the soul warrior way, right? That takes so much strength and courage to really just let yourself feel your emotions. Don't get angry. Don't get defensive. Don't get distracted. Just sit with it. Cry with it. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, or if you're identified in some other way with your orientation, with your gender, whatever that is, at a human level, you need to sit with it. You need to cry. You need to scream. You need to do whatever it takes to move that through, okay? And if you allow yourself to sit with it, and all it is a choice. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to say any affirmations. Oh, I choose to do this. Any kind of special practice. It's really just a choice that you're telling yourself, I'm going to process this. I'm going to let myself feel this. I'm going to sit with it and I'm going to surrender it. So just notice the next time that some kind of old pain comes up, or maybe it's current pain that you're just like you're just sitting in it. Notice it and surrender to it by saying, I'm just going to let it be here. And I'm going to let it express itself however it needs to. However, maybe my body wants to move and express itself that way. Maybe it's tears, maybe it's yelling, maybe it's both. And when you have a really intense grief from some sort of loss or from the death of a loved one, relationship breakups or divorces can be just as traumatic as is losing a person to death. And I've seen it again and again. They can be more traumatic at times, especially if it's sudden. The suddenness can become very traumatic. Sometimes that could look like you're driving to work, you're driving somewhere, and you feel this emotion coming up. You've just experienced this major loss, or maybe it's a loss you experienced years ago, but you never really fully processed it. So it's time now. And that's another thing that goes back to what I said before we started talking. There's been this time period, and it still is going on for some people, where there's just like I said before in another episode, there's so much light pouring onto the planet, and it's impacting us. There's so much love and light pouring through. What it's doing is it's bringing all of what is not that pure love light, all of which is pain and suffering, to the surface, so that you can heal it, so that you can release it. And you cannot bring in more of this light energy and more of this love without releasing. So those of you that are struggling to release, it's going to be a lot more rocky for you, right? Because it's kind of like there's a resistance there. So really listen to how this might work. And it takes vulnerability. It takes vulnerability to let this process unfold. Okay. So let's say you're driving to work. Let's say you're driving somewhere, you're getting ready in the morning. It might look like, if it was one of these shocking, traumatic loss of a close loved one, or a sudden loss of a relationship in a traumatic way, it might look like you pulling off the side and just sobbing. And when I'm talking about sobbing, I'm not just saying like you've got some tears rolling. I'm talking about loud sobbing. If that's what your body wants to do, if that's what comes out, let it out. You know, there's been, for some generations especially, but still now to some extent, and certain families, there's this idea that you need to stifle that. And if you're feeling it in your throat, when you're feeling this emotion, you're stifling it. You're trying to swallow it back down. Do not do that. Let it come out. Maybe your crying is quiet. That's okay. Let it all come out is the point. And then you just start driving again. Okay. You're getting ready in the morning. It comes over you. Just let it out and start crying for however long it takes. The more intense the crying and the loudness for a lot of people, when there's true sobbing, that's usually a sign that more is being released more quickly, right? So if there's just some tears rolling, depending on your situation, but I'm talking about like a major shocking trauma loss. But if there's just some tears rolling, that's like some beautiful releasing. But if it's like loud and it's sobbing, it's really moving through you. So that's one part. Allow for that. Be okay for that. Emotions are there for a reason. Emotions move energy. Okay. Emotions move energy. Emotions are energy in motion. Okay. So we need to let them move through us. That's okay if you want to be more of a logical person. You know, this whole idea of masculine and feminine energies, and I'm going to talk about that more in detail in another episode. But sometimes the masculine energy, if you're too far, we each have masculine and feminine in us, right? And so we want to heal and balance both. That's going to be in another episode. But sometimes we're too far and we're leading with our masculine, and that's fine. Women or men can lead with their masculine. That's okay. Other people are leading with their feminine. That's okay. But you want to make sure both are healed and balanced. And that's some things we'll talk about in another time. But what I'm talking about is sometimes there's this idea of to be a man, a masculine man, no crying. Absolutely not. No emotions. Absolutely not. The healthy, masculine, divine masculine is someone that is okay with the emotions. They may choose time and place and who to share it with, and it may not be very many people, but they are going to allow themselves to have emotions. And I'm even talking about, there's all types of different men, right? But I'm even talking about the types of men that would be more physical warriors. They'd be more into physical fitness and those types of things, right? There's more of this physicality. There's a lot of logic. That's not going to be balanced if they're not allowing for emotions, because they're going to be all blocked up, right? And that's going to lead to more pain and suffering for them. So you have to let your emotions flow, whoever you are, okay? You can do it privately. There's nothing wrong with that. Or you can share it with just a couple people. That's okay too. Discernment is important. So let's say that you're at work, right? Or you just started a new job and you feel this come over you. Okay, well, you're not going to start bawling in front of like a classroom full of children, like if you're a teacher or your boss, or if you're a counselor with a client, right? You're not going to do that. You're going to say, okay, I acknowledge that. And you breathe a little bit, and then you excuse yourself to the bathroom, let it all out. Or you just choose a time later. I am acknowledging I have this emotion that needs to release. I'm going to do it this evening. So there are times where that's going to be appropriate, and that's okay too. But if you're by yourself and you're stifling it, you're going to feel it here and you're going to feel it here. You've got to let it flow. Allow yourself to rest. Okay. When you're experiencing pain, grief, loss, some people want to keep going, and they're like going a million miles an hour. They're not taking enough time to really rest. Keep in mind that when you're experiencing something as a major loss or grief, especially if it's traumatic, you're going to feel a lot more tired because your body, a part of your body doesn't understand what this is. Your body isn't really understanding that this is an emotional trauma. Okay. So the body is responding to some extent, like there's something wrong physically. So you're going to be able to feel tired. Okay. You're going to there might be fatigue. Most people feel very tired or fatigued. Majority, I'm talking like 99%. So you need to allow for more rest. You need to allow for some time off on a break. You could go on a little trip somewhere and just take a full week off to just sort of process things in a beautiful setting. That's fine too. You could just do a little half. For some people, too much time off, too much time with nothing is too challenging. So it's a balance, right? And it's going to look different for everybody. Another point, very important point. When you are experiencing some sort of pain and grief from this perception of this loss, this experience of this loss, it's really, really important for you to not compare your experience of it to somebody else, okay? I've actually worked with a lot of people who have lost children, especially recently, which is very interesting. In each of them, I think there's 3 or 4, and each of them have experienced it very differently, and they're having very different responses to it, and they have very different needs to it. Okay. And the same thing I've worked with hundreds of people that have experienced the loss of a relationship, and often in a very traumatic way. And there's a grieving process with that same thing. It looks very different depending on the person. So I really want you to give yourself permission to allow it to feel and look however it needs to look for you, because you are a very unique individual. You have a different design. And so what your grief and loss is going to look like is going to look different than somebody else. Okay. And so if somebody's trying to tell you, oh, you need to cry, you need to feel it, you need to do this and that, just disregard, because your body is going to do what it needs to do. Another important point, sometimes this looks like numbness at first. Sometimes it's like you know what's happened, and you know there's been this major thing that you've experienced as deep pain and deep grief, but there's numbness. And so maybe people are saying you're not letting yourself cry, or you're saying that to yourself. No, numbness is part of it for a lot of people. Okay. You might feel completely emotionless. That might be part of the shock. That might be that you're supposed to feel numb to get through what's coming next, whether this is a funeral or whether this is you have to keep working or taking care of a child. If the numbness is there and it's not of your creation, we can create numbness through substances and through refusal to look at it, and through staying in denial and resistance, right? We can create that feeling, but if you are not creating it, and you'll know because it'll just be there. That's how you'll know that you're not creating it. It'll just be there. You're not trying to, you're trying to allow, you're open to it. Then it's purposeful, okay? Because your body and your emotions and your mind, it knows what it needs to do, and it knows when. So you might have all these things that you just have to do. If you have children and other things, you can't just stop that, right? But you can make arrangements to take more time to yourself. Even if you have children and very busy, you have to find ways to let other people help you, which is another point that's coming up in a moment. But when it comes to that, it might be that there's so many different things that you're dealing with at once that you can't process it right then. So you're going to be numb about it for a while. And then in a couple of years, for some people, or in a couple of months or a couple of weeks, then here it comes, because you now have the emotional and energetic capacity to process that. So it's coming up for you because that capacity, that energy that's required to deal with it is now available. And so your mind and body is going to let that come up naturally. So again, let it be your own individual experience. And keep in mind that crying is healing and release. Opening to allowing for this crying whenever it's coming up. And even if this was years ago and all of a sudden now you're grieving a divorce, now you're grieving a relationship, or now you're realizing you have a fear of relationships because you've just met somebody really special, but you're like resisting it. That's okay. That's okay. It's coming up for a reason. So go ahead and process it now. Process all of it. It's one thing to choose to not be in a relationship. and to say, that's not my path. That's not what I'm going to do. That doesn't feel right to me. And if that feels good to you, if there's not any resistance and that in you're choosing to be celibate, this is what you want, then that's okay. But for a lot of people that are choosing that, it's a wound, it's a pain, it's a fear. Okay. So face the fear. What is that? Is that something I want to break from? Is that something that I'm just choosing not to? And I feel really comfortable with that choice? Or am I going dormant and numb about it because they've had so many painful endings? They've had so much rejection, or I've had so many difficult experiences that's a wound there, and I just don't want to touch it. I just want to stay away from it. But deep down, you truly want that relationship again. Deep down, you have some sort of belief that maybe there is somebody that's right for you, and maybe none of those people before were. But that doesn't mean that there's not somebody that is. Those experiences were all helping to lead you to this new situation, this divine counterpart type of relationship. They were giving you lessons. They were teaching you certain things. They were helping you to evolve. So if some of you listening to this, you've been through a lot of relationships that were challenging. Maybe you're in one now. Please remember, again, a different episode, but please remember, relationships, the purpose of relationships are for spiritual evolution, for personal evolution, if you don't want to call it spiritual. They're for evolution and growth. So it's really important that we view these relationships as evolution and growth, not what can I get from the other person? They need to fill this need. I need this from them. I need that from them. It's okay to speak about equal giving and receiving, and for that to be a part of your relationship. But I'm more talking about looking at it like, okay, let's grow and evolve together. Let's see what we can teach each other. And let's have so much joy and fun and new experiences together along the way. So falling in love, being in love, approaching relationships in a new way without that holding on tightly and the attachment and the expectation and those things that really move into those more negative frequency levels, right? So that's something else. Again, another episode. I'm going to try to do several short episodes in season 2. This one's longer. The next ones, I'm going to try to do shorter ones. There's like a frequency based on a book that I use a lot of times in healing sessions, and I measure the frequency before and measure it after so that they can see the difference. And each frequency has different emotions involved. So if you're in a relationship and you guys are in this attachment and what can they do for me, and I need this and I need that, and they're not enough, all these types of things, that's going to be in a lower frequency, right? So what are we trying to do here right now? What are we trying to do? We're trying to support the evolution and growth of ourselves, which is in turn humanity, right? Because all you have to ever do is heal yourself. If you heal yourself and you heal your wounds and your traumas and you evolve, that is going to have huge impacts on humanity that you may never even fully understand. So that's all you ever have to do. If you want to be of service, if you want to help people, do your own inner work, evolve, love yourself, let this pain be processed, let it break you open, let it heal you. And so seek support in any way that you need as you move through this experience of grief or loss. A lot of people, they try to go at it alone, right? So there's so much support available. Go to someone who understands it, who you resonate with. Maybe it's family and friends, or maybe you need some professional support with it, and maybe you need some energy support with it as well. Energetic healing is massively powerful when it comes to processing grief and emotion, and also a somatic healing, where if most people do have some level of pain stored in their body, and that's some of what I do in sessions too, is let's find it and let's release it. So seek support in any way that you need it. I want to reiterate that crying is not weakness. It's sacred vulnerability. So we talked about that in what I read initially. Sacred vulnerability is not weakness. It's power and strength, and takes so much courage to allow whatever pain that you're experiencing to change you. And you can do it. It is very challenging. It takes so much courage to really open, to be in that place of sacred vulnerability. I'm going to open my heart and I'm going to let this pour in, and I'm going to let myself feel it all. And it will change you. You can do it, and you're not alone in it. You are not alone, and you can do it. You are being fully supported every step of the way as you do this work. And I call it work because in some ways it is. It's really very easy once you start to allow it. It's just more the first step of, okay, I'm going to let myself be vulnerable. I'm going to allow myself to sink into sacred vulnerability. Again, okay, if you choose just certain times so that you can do this more privately, allow it though. Okay. Another part of grief is that it's very unique. It's very interesting. It will bring up, let's say you lose a loved one or lose a relationship in a traumatic way. Anything that is unhealed within you, anything that you have not completely healed, the grief, the new loss will bring it up. And it will release that too. Okay, so a lot of you that have had deep grief, deep pain, deep loss, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If anything that you got in there, and you might have thought, oh my God, really? I thought I healed this like years ago. There's more. Yeah. Sometimes there's more. Sometimes there's little tiny pieces. So if you have little tiny pieces that are not completely healed, even if you really did fully cry and process it for a long time in a bunch of different ways, there might still be a little bit more. Okay. Let that come up too. That's a blessing. It might feel like, oh, I'm crying about all these multiple things. I know, I understand. Just let it flow. I want to stress again to you, the shortened time period, if you do it the way I'm talking about, you can move through this in a few days. If you let the light pour in, if you let the sacred vulnerability, in some cases, you can move through it in just a few days. Okay. It depends on a lot of things. It also depends on your beliefs about what this loss is, what it means to you. That's one huge thing. But it can be moved through very rapidly. And it might be that you move through it really rapidly, and then a few weeks later or a couple months later, there's another wave, or maybe it's, a wave every other week. It really just depends. Sometimes it's waves for people. It's really important to grieve whatever presents itself. Anything that presents itself that says, yep, this is unprocessed. I need to heal this. Let it come up, whatever it is. It might be that it's triggering something that's completely unrelated to the death of this person or to the loss of this relationship. That's important to let that grieve. Really important to let yourself receive love and support from others. A lot of people have been so used to maybe doing things alone. Maybe they've had relationships that didn't work out, and so they've lived alone, and they're just used to, hey, I got to do everything alone. This is what, I manage my life. I got to do this. I got to do that. And they've gotten used to that. Maybe they're programmed. They've got some sort of patterning about not allowing others to help and support them and to love them. A lot of people have a pattern and a wound that they don't fully allow themselves to be loved by the divine, by whatever their belief is, and God, the divine source, and or to accept the love from another person. So really check yourself on that too. Are you willing to receive love in all its forms? Love from the divine, love from another person, love in all its forms. You are worthy of it. All of you, everyone, worthy of love, and to receive it in all its forms. You might have worked a lot on this, but if you have some more grief or pain that comes up, you might notice that, oh my gosh, I thought that was gone. Or if you meet a master, somebody that has a very high frequency, it can trigger a lot of pain to come up. Or if you meet your divine counterpart, your soulmate, somebody that you have a soul connection with, when those energies come together, it creates this massive transformation. So anything unhealed, anything that needs to be healed will come up, and that can be a little bit challenging too, or a lot challenging. But let it come up. The more that you just allow that, faster it'll go, I promise you. So allow yourself to receive love and support from others. So many of my clients, they do not want to receive support from others. They have these really close friends. They have family members that would be so willing to watch their child for a few hours so they can get a break, so they can process what's coming up for them, or just because they're exhausted, or because they're sick, or they don't feel very good, whatever it is. They just don't want to make that call because it makes them feel like they're failing somehow. Receiving love and support from others making you feel like you're failing, or maybe there's an ego thing. I shouldn't need that. I'm this or that, or no, we all need that. And that's really an important part of your spiritual evolution, your personal evolution, and your journey, to allow yourself to be loved and supported by others. Think about it reversed. Wouldn't you want to love and support them? Then you need to allow it too. This is purification as you release all of these pain, all of the suffering, all of this, these emotions that are coming up for you. This is purification when you allow others to support you as they offer it and as you need it. It's purification, and you'll be forever changed if you allow this process, forever changed. And absolutely is a catalyst for transformation. Like I said, it can happen very rapidly. You will begin to become a better version of yourself. Allow the defenses that are dropped due to this experience that you've just had, that the experience created, to fall away completely. Allow the sacred vulnerability to be there and surrender to it. Sit with it. Think about it. When you have a deep pain, a deep grief, a loss, somebody just died that you're really close with, this relationship just ended really traumatically. In that moment, all these defenses are dropped and you feel very open and vulnerable. That's sacred vulnerability. And that's really a beautiful thing. You have to allow it though. A lot of times it feels really scary to allow that to be there, but that's transformational. Not only is this a path to greater realization, transformation, and even spiritual enlightenment, but it's also the quickest path out of the suffering and grief you're experiencing. Like I mentioned before, quickest path. People can truly become realized, absolutely, definitely transformed. There can even be spiritual enlightenment if you let it break you open, if you allow the sacred vulnerability and you just let it come. Just let it come. When I talked about the beliefs, I feel like that's another episode. I don't want to get too far into that, or else this will be too long of an episode. But let's say that your belief about death is that that's the end. That person, you'll never have any experiences with that person. That's the end. That's going to be a very different grief than somebody that has the belief that this person has just left the physical body because what they came here to do and experience on this earth is complete. We didn't know ahead of time it was going to be so young. Didn't know ahead of time it was going to be through this cause. Nobody knew ahead of time, so it was still surprising. But ultimately, if you have this foundational belief that it was purposeful and their soul lives on and they've had the experiences that they were meant to have, that is going to be a completely different grieving process than if your belief was the first one I mentioned. And there's all kinds of other beliefs that are going to create different types of grieving experiences, right? Furthermore, if you believe that you can connect with your departed loved one at a spiritual level when they've passed, that does not stop the grief process. A lot of people think, well, if you're a medium and if you're this or if you're that, like somebody that is a professional medium, for example, then why would you have grief? Well, because you're still going to miss the physical presence of that person. It's different. You're in different dimensions. So there's still a grief process. There's still going to be a missing of that person in most cases when that takes place, right? Perhaps a completely self-realized, God-realized master that it has that in a sustained way. It's not just experiences of that. Perhaps they don't have it touch in, but pretty much everyone, even if they're a medium, they will 100% still have a grief process. However, it adds a gentleness and more of a peace because they're having that connection, or they know that connection is possible. Another thing, somebody that I just recently spoke to, they were like, well, I don't know if I have that ability. Absolutely, you do. If your belief is such that you feel that, and I think that the world is changing enough and people are having enough direct experiences that it's kind of hard to argue that it's not true and real. And of course, I know that it is. I've had so many direct experiences, but people that haven't really experienced it before, all you have to do is open up to it. That's it. That's what I told this person. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to have some sort of special gift to connect with your departed person. If you believe that's possible and you would like to have that, open up to it, ask for it. A lot of times it comes in dreams. Sometimes it can come in many forms, and we can talk about more details on that in another episode. If you do not believe that and your faith is against that, then you're going to be closed off to it and you won't experience it. And that's okay too. You don't have to believe that. Okay. I'm just explaining that those who do have, they can have very powerful direct experiences that are just undeniable. No way to say that that's not real for them and that that didn't happen. 100% it was and is. And I just want to reinforce that you don't have to have any special gifts or abilities to be able to have a connection. Also want to briefly mention that for some of this, the experience of death of a loved one or loss of some sort that we've described many different versions of that, it can lead to death of parts of ourselves, right? The old defenses and patterns and limitations that no longer serve us, that they can die during these grief processes. So whatever's coming up for you as you're moving through this experience of grief or loss, some of it might be death of parts of your old self. Ego deaths is another way of saying that, but I'm talking about very specific parts of your old self, the old defenses, the old patterns, or maybe it's just the old limitations, parts of you that you realize are no longer serving you, that are coming up. And maybe as you're experiencing the grief, you're actually crying and grieving that this is not part of my authentic self. And so it's another way of uncovering your authentic soulful self, to let these parts of you die. And some of you will experience some of these moments of grief and loss as death of parts of you. And that's beautiful. That's transformation. That's evolution. The greatest gift that you can give to the world and how you can be of service to all of humanity to ease suffering and support the transformation is transforming and healing yourself. But I want to add, remember the previous discussions that we've had in other episodes, how we're all connected as a collective of humanity through an energetic matrix or web. Quantum physics has proven that in a specific way at this point, to a certain extent at least, but that's how I see it. That's how I've been shown it. That's how I know it to be true. We're all connected through this energetic matrix or web. So as you do that, that energy moves through the collective and is powerful and healing. And it's adding another higher frequency individual to humanity, which is having all kinds of effects, which I can also go into in another episode. Okay, so let this experience of grief, pain, loss teach you how to love more unconditionally and respect all those that you see, both loved ones and strangers. They're all on their own path, and they're at a very specific point in their path, and it isn't the same as yours, right? I want you to think back to where you've been and where you are now. Let's say that you had a period of time where you were struggling, you were angry all the time, you were addicted, maybe you felt broken. Think back to that time when you were just really going through it versus later. Like maybe you went through that time and then years later, you're in this completely different place and it's like you're a different person. Think back to that and think to where you are now after a lot of transformation. So thinking back to that and thinking to where you are now, if somebody had met you on your path when you were struggling and you were addicted or you're angry all the time, what did you need? Well, you didn't need them to be mean to you, right? You didn't need them to judge you. You needed love, didn't you? When you go through a transformation, you become a higher version of yourself and you think back to these other moments where you were in pain, you were in suffering, you were in addiction. You needed love during that time period too, where you were struggling. Maybe you got it. If you did, that's amazing. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you got judgments. Maybe you did self-judgments. Maybe you had nowhere to turn to. But this can help you to look through a different lens. When you see somebody struggling, angry, addicted, whatever it is, they're at a certain point in their path. And it might be that years later, they're a completely different point. But what you can do to help them is just love them. Love them through it, right? And the same thing with someone's grieving. Sometimes you just hold them and you just help them cry. You just love them through it. You hold their hand. You see they're struggling. If this is someone close to you, hold their hand. You see them struggling. You just hold them while they go through it. Can't take it away, but you can love them and you can support them. And then there are some people that are angry and that lashing out. So you can't do that in a direct way, but you can love them from a distance, and that's going to have effects, right? Because everything is energy. They're going to get that energy. It's going to help them. So when people are in that state, when you are in that state, if this applies to you, It doesn't seem very lovable, right? You don't seem very lovable during this time of intense struggle, but that's when the people, and that's when you needed it the most. So that's what we need to start doing more of. Okay. Recognize it. That's what they need the most in those times when they seem the least lovable. Okay. And this can relate to relationships. When your person comes along and you finally open up to that, or maybe you open up to it right away, and then you start seeing all their stuff. Maybe you're not moving into the relationship because you're afraid they're going to see all your stuff. Can you love all those parts of them that aren't healed yet? If you can love all those parts of them that aren't healed yet, and they can love all yours, that's going to be a beautiful relationship of healing and growth and evolution together. And that's what it's all about, right? And there's going to be a lot of joy too. There's not going to be fighting. It's going to be like, okay, you have that in you, but you both have to be willing to do your inner work. This life is fleeting, so live it to the fullest and don't leave anything unsaid or undone. You can't let things slip through your fingers if it's something that you know is there for you. Don't leave things unsaid. Don't leave things undone. Remember too that ultimately at the higher level, separation is an illusion. Say it again. Remember too that at the highest level, separation is an illusion. We are never truly separated from our departed loved ones. And more people are receiving that contact, like I mentioned, through dreams, waking life, or as symbols. You just have to allow for divine timing of things. Even those that we've lost through separation are not lost. Okay. Even though those we've lost through separation are not lost, we are connected at all times. There is no separation. At the energetic and spiritual level, there is no separation. That part is actually an illusion. So contemplate on that idea. Is there actually ever anything truly lost? Is there ever actually anything truly lost? Separation is an illusion. Just let that percolate and contemplate that idea and all of these other ideas and information, and see if you can allow your experience of grief, pain, and loss to transform you, and to allow yourself to transform through this process. Ultimately, what it's going to do is help you to love more unconditionally each day as you move forward. It's going to transform you. It's going to help you to move more and more into that unconditional love, which is really the point of this, right? Okay, so that wraps up this episode. I want to end by just taking a moment. Please close your eyes if that's possible for you. Take a couple deep breaths. I want you to scan your body from head to toe. So when I say scan your body from head to toe, you're just kind of like starting at your head and you're just feeling, tuning in to the different parts of your body from head to toe. Notice if there's anywhere that feels tight, constricted, stuck, heavy, or maybe you can literally feel pain there. Okay, if you found it, I want you to just breathe in and out. Okay, breath is something that can move energy. Really important to breathe when you have grief, loss, or pain. A lot of times that's one of the things. We stop breathing, we constrict. Going to the place that you feel the pain. One option is to breathe in and out through it. So let's say it's at your heart center. Breathe in, collect it all, whatever's there that hasn't been processed, whatever pain is there. As you inhale, collect it. Exhale, breathe it out through that energy center. So see if you can just breathe in and out, creating that space. Good, that's one option. Another option, let's say that it's lower. Let's say it's at your tailbone or low back, or knees or ankles. Breathing in the same way. So you can collect all of that. And then as you exhale, push it down out the bottoms of your feet. Make sure your feet feel nice and open. Maybe move your toes. Moving your toes, spreading your toes can open that foot chakra. So inhale, exhale it out through the bottoms of your feet. Maybe it's forceful. Good. If it's here, a lot of people have blockages here in throat. Again, inhale, collect all of that energy. Maybe you see it as darkness. Maybe you see it as little particles or block, whatever you see it as. Maybe it's a color. Inhale, collect all that. Exhale, breathe it out your mouth. It's in your head, lots of thought forms, lots of negative thoughts, lots of fears. Inhale, collect it all in your brain. Exhale, breathe it out your third eye. Maybe even out the top of your head. Good. So those are some tools that you can use. And those are some things that I do often in sessions to support people in releasing it from the body. This is something though that you can start to do at home if you feel like you have something stuck. And of course, I'm always here for you. If you'd like some support with that, please contact me. I will, we can schedule something. I have a variety of different methods and tools to do anything that you need, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, energetically. So I'm here for you. You're never alone. I love you. We love you. I'm here for you. I've so enjoyed connecting with you today, and I will so look forward to the next time. Bye for now.